All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope everybody had a good weekend. So, just if you can't hear me, go ahead and put it on there. But I'm just going to assume that y'all can hear me. I just want to go over a few ground rules real quick. First of all, I am live coming from my house. So, it's possible, someone might knock on the door and my dog might bark or something like that. So, if I have to go take care of something, I'll be right back as soon as I can. And then also, I'm only going to be answering questions that are asked during the office hours. If I saw there's a lot of people that it looks like some people asked questions over the weekend. I see like Saturday, Sunday. There's some questions that have been being posted. If you post your questions and it's not during an office hours, it's most likely not going to get answered. So I'm only going to be answering questions that are asked during the office hours, and this is just so the people are here at the office hours can, uh, get their questions answered, see it live. If I'm going back and answering a bunch of questions that were posted overnight or things like that, those people may not actually be there to see their question get answered. So, and then if it's a question, for example, that can be answered easily by a video or a course that we have on the website already, then I'm just going to steer you in the direction of that course. For example, if someone asks, "Hey, how do I fix my slice?" I'm going to steer you in the direction of our Never Slice Again course on the website. I had one more other thing I want to mention. I can't remember what it was, but so if you got questions, so we just got a few people in here, but if you got questions, go ahead. I mean, that's what I'm here to answer questions. So if you guys aren't asking questions, I don't really have anything to do here. But it looks like I'll start out with Ron D's question here. And again, he asked this question 56 minutes ago, but I don't have any questions to answer right now. So I'll go ahead and start with his. So Ron D says, at what point during the straight line release does the right heel come off the ground? Thanks. All right. So essentially, your right heel should already be coming off the ground before you're even in the straight line release. So basically, usually at impact, you will see tour players 1 or 2 inches, their heel is off the ground. If your heel is on the ground at impact, it might be fine, but it might also be an issue because it may not be allowing you to really open up and get to your lead side. A lot of times when I see people with their trail heel on the ground at impact, their hips are usually square at impact. And one thing that could be happening is not allowing that heel to come off the ground, trying to keep it planted in the ground, because I think it's kind of a myth that people think I shouldn't move around my feet at all. Well, you got to move around your feet to be dynamic and powerful. So in order to allow your body to kind of come up and rotate into impact, you got to allow that heel to come off the ground. So when we're talking straight line release, that's talking when the club is splitting the forearm. So we're coming into impact, there's impact, and then the club is splitting my forearms right here. That's where we say the straight line release is. And you want that to be about 45 degrees out in front. That'd be ideal. If it's 30 degrees, that may be fine. If it's 55 degrees, that's fine too. There's an acceptable range there. I would say anywhere between, 25. 25 would probably be releasing a little bit too early, but anything near 30 is usually pretty good. But 45 is that's mainly what we say on the website. We actually measured tour players. All the major winners of the last 20 years, we went and looked at all their video and we measured where they released the club, where that straight line release is, and the average was 41. Now, when Clay came up with the system, he didn't know that specific number. He just knew that it was about, somewhere like 45 degrees out in front. So we say 45 degrees out in front because that's really, it's an easy angle to quantify, right? You know what a 90-degree angle is. And 45 is just half of that. It's like a triangle, basically, right? A 90-degree triangle. So I think it's just easier. It's easy to look at that and say, yeah, that looks about 45. And when we look at tour players, that's basically what we saw. But we measured them all, and it was 41. So if you're coming in and you're releasing this club and your heel is still on the ground, your back heel, your body is probably not opening up, and you're probably releasing that club too early. So there's actually a video. There's a few videos on the website about getting that heel off the ground. I don't know off the top of my head what videos they are, but there's definitely some drills in the Top Speed Golf system where you're coming down into impact and you're pausing at impact and you've got that trail heel. So if I'm coming down this way, hopefully you can see that. I'm coming down, I got this trail heel an inch or two off the ground. I've seen players, they kind of do a slide a little bit, is the whole reason why we don't want to keep the heel on the ground is so because basically if you keep that heel on the ground, it acts kind of as an anchor for your hips. You can't really keep rotating your hips. You got to allow that heel to come off the ground to free up the hips. So doing this is kind of a form of getting the heel off the ground, even though the heel's not coming off the ground. It's sliding, but you got to allow that foot to come all the way around so you can get into a full finish. So to answer your question, that heel should be coming off the ground well before that straight line release. But basically at impact, you're seeing 1 or 2 inches. About halfway down in the downswing, you're probably going to start seeing that heel come off the ground. Everybody's a little bit different, but really you just don't want to try and keep it planted. Free it up and allow it to come off the ground. As long as you're doing that, you should be in good shape. All right. Okay, let's next question here. That's yesterday. Sorry, I'm just trying to find. There we go. So JT says, it suggested that I should add 2.5 to my driver, add in 2.5 to my driver. How much would this increase my club head speed? Add 2.5. Assuming you're meaning add 2.5 inches to your driver. If that's what you're saying. So adding length can increase your club head speed. It's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily mean that it absolutely will, but in theory, it definitely will, because so the longer the arm is, basically, the longer the club is, the faster you can swing it. But there's obviously, it's not necessarily just because you get a longer club doesn't mean you're going to swing it faster. In fact, my driver, I believe, is 45 and a half, I believe, inches. And Clay's his is like 1.5 inches or 2 inches longer than mine. I've swung his driver, and I swing it about the same speed as what I swing mine. So it's kind of a little bit about the weight, the shaft. Just because you add length to something doesn't mean you're automatically going to add club head speed. But it's definitely worth trying. I always tell people, play the length of driver that you're comfortable with, and that gives you the most speed, and that kind of gives you that best mix of the maximum speed and maximum control that you can have. That's going to be the right length for you. So, you can go with a long drive version of a driver, and you might swing it a little bit faster, but if you can't hit anywhere near the sweet spot on it, you're not going to be able to use that little extra club head speed that you're getting to, you're not going to allow that to give you any distance. So I don't know a quantifiable number of 2.5 inches is going to give you this much, because everybody's a little bit different. You might swing a longer club a little bit differently. It might give you a ton more club head speed, but you can't control it, and you won't get more, necessarily miles per hour or distance from it. So something to think about, but try it out. Try out an inch that's a driver that's 2.5 inches longer, and see what kind of control you have with it, and what kind of if you're able to hit the sweet spot, and if you're able to get more club head speed from it. I would check that out. It's definitely worth looking into for sure. All right. So Ron D says, at what point in the swing? Okay. So I'd answer that question just to start out with. So Robert B says, as my legs are driving and shifting my weight, turning my body, what role does the left arm play in the strike of the ball? None. That is it fully passive? Does the whole arm swing through actively, just parts? So if you do me a favor, whenever you all ask questions, try to kind of use some I'm having a hard time reading Robert's question here, and it's kind of all jumbled up, and I'm not sure where the sentence ending and starting. So if you would, just use some commas or separate your sentences a little bit. So I think what Robert's trying to ask here is, what role is the left arm, and what is, I think, he's kind of saying, is it passive and things like that. So first of all, whenever asks a question where someone says, what does it feel like? Is my arm actively doing this? Should I passively be doing this? So everyone's feels are a little bit different. What I feel in my golf swing and what you may feel in your golf swing are two completely different things. So a lot of people ask, am I actively turning my shoulders? And it's like, well, your shoulders are turning. Whether you need to feel if you're actively doing it or not is another story. So the left arm, am I active? Do I feel like I'm really going at the ball with my left arm, or do I feel more passive with my left arm? Whatever gives you the best result is the feeling that you should use. But what I feel to give me the best result and what you feel to get you the best result may be two completely different things. So I would say usually in the lead arm, I would say it does not feel passive. Just that's my feeling. I'm really trying to pull everything coming through here as hard as I can. But if you see on video that your arms are just kind of flying in front of your body, and there's no body rotation or anything, you may need to feel more like you're using the body to rotate open. You need to be more passive with your arms. So that may be the feeling that you may need to have, but may not be the feeling that someone else may need to have. So you just need to look at your swing on camera and look at the 5 pieces of the Top Speed Golf System, see where you stack up, and then work on the pieces and use the feelings that give you the positions that you want on camera and that translate to better contact, better shots, more speed, and things like that. So I always recommend getting something to measure your club head speed, whether it be a Swing Caddy 2 or a Swing Speed Radar, if you have access to a TrackMan or something like that. Because that way, when you are hitting balls or whatever, you can see, okay, now if I just used this feeling in this swing and it gave me 100 miles per hour. Now I'm going to try this kind of feeling and we'll see what kind of miles per hour that it gets me. And you can see, okay, did that help or did that hurt things? Did it make the ball go higher? Did it make me slice it? Did it make me chunk the ball? A lot of golf is just adjusting your feeling to get the desired result that you want. So if you hear somebody say, I feel my left arm is passive, that doesn't mean that you should go out and just try to work on your left arm being passive. You need to go out and work on what actually helps you hit the ball better, because it doesn't mean that that's what's going to help you. It's what helps that other person, but not necessarily you. All right. So moving on to David F here, says, I really struggle with disassociating my hips and shoulders. What drills do you recommend to help with opening the hips early and creating this disassociation? So first of all, there's a couple things you want to look at for helping you to open up the hips. So the first thing is you want to make sure that you're generating some sort of lag. So if you're releasing this club early from the top, basically the arms are just going to fly in front of the body to square up the face, and you're not going to have any. It's going to be hard to use your hips. Your hips aren't going to want to move to make that happen. And then you also want to make sure that you're shallowing out the club. So the same thing is going to happen if you're coming down steep. You're going to want to kind of stand up, and when you stand up, you can't rotate the hips and get that disassociation. So if you're having trouble opening up your body into impact, I'd definitely be looking at the move section. Get that club shallowing out in the downswing. So the way to get to the courses on the website is if you click on the house icon at the top of about any page, click on that house icon. That's going to bring you to the home page. And if you scroll down, you'll see all the courses on the website. So you'll want to choose the move. That's going to get you to where you're shallowing it out, squaring that face early so that you can rotate into impact. You also may want to look at the lag section, see if you're generating any lag. We want to be having this nice sharp angle as we're coming down. So if you come down and you look at your swing on camera and then the downswing, your downswing looks like that, you're throwing that away, you're casting it. Well, I would look at generating some lag in the downswing. That may be what you need to do. So I don't know the exact thing that you may need to do to help with that. But we do offer unlimited swing review program that I believe I have a couple, maybe 1 or 2 spots open right now. I think Robin has some spots open as well. So if you like an instructor to take a look at your swing and tell you exactly what you need to do to help you to open up your hips, then we'd be happy to do that for you. So check out our unlimited swing review program. You can click on get a review at the top of any page, and we can take a look at your swing. But those would be the 2 biggest things I would say: casting and making sure that you're shallowing out that club. Because if you're steep like this, if your club's coming down like this, you're going to need to stand up out of it to shallow out that club late, and you're just not going to rotate when you're standing up out of it. So I'd be definitely looking at those 2 pieces for sure. Al S says, I just started the system. Do I need to complete 3,000 reps before moving on from level 1 and stable fluid spine? So no, I mean, you can do whatever you want. What I would do, the thing is, like, if you don't do enough repetition, so let's say you're in the stable fluid spine section, and you understand, okay, I need to be angled the way I address. This is going to make it easier for me. And you get 1,000 reps into it, and you're like, okay, I got it. I know what I need to do. And then you move on to another piece, and you see that you're still remaining. Everything looks good, just finding, you're keeping an eye on it. That's completely fine. The problem is that you go and you get your right spine angle, and then you go and move on something else, and you're not thinking about that thing. You haven't taken the time to ingrain it, to make it second nature, to make it completely natural for you. If you don't go through that to, go through the time and the repetition to do that, well, when you move on, you basically just wasted your time when you moved on to something else, because you're just going to go back to what you did before, what you were comfortable with before. So no, you don't have to do that, but I would recommend that you get enough reps in. And that doesn't mean that, you're at rep 2,999 and you don't have it, and then 3,000 reps, boom, you've got it, you can move on. It may take you 10,000 reps. It may take you 10 reps. It just depends on your, if you're comfortable with it, or if it feels natural for you or not. If it's something that feels really, really way off, does not come naturally for you, then you may need to put more time into it. Whereas if it's something that's, this feels great, I'm actually hitting the ball a lot better, you may not need to put that many reps into it. So it's just 3,000 is just a number that we felt like, or that Clay felt like, this is where it takes most people. That's about what it takes for most people to get in the right frame. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you need to do. So you're going to need to be kind of your best judge on that. So if you move on to something else and you see that your spine and everything looks good, then you're probably in good shape. You don't need to work too much more on it. But if you move on to something else and then you see instantly your spine angle goes right back to what it was before, you probably need to go back and work on the spine angle and make that second nature. All right. So Dennis M says, my backswing, I tend to feel that I am on my toes of my feet. How can I correct this? Any drills? So I would, well, first of all, whenever you feel like you're in your toes of your feet, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Anything that you change with your technique or the feelings that you have, it has to be to improve what's happening at impact. So if we're kind of in our toes of our feet, it can be a little bit harder. We're kind of leaning out toward the golf ball. Maybe if you're in extreme case, if you're kind of in an extreme case, you may be kind of having to stand up so that you don't fall over, and you may be kind of standing up out of your swing, which can cause some other issues, and it can cause you to kind of come over the top. So you got to look at what's happening at impact and say, okay, what does being out on my toes, what's happening at my impact? So basically the best way to fix about anything in the golf swing is to exaggerate the opposite. So what would be the opposite of being on your toes? That would be being on your heels, right? So I would just do and I would exaggerate it too. I would do some drills where you kind of feel like you're in your heels a lot to kind of negate that feeling. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be swinging way, way back like that. It just means that you're adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. The reality is most likely going to be that you're going to be more in the arches of your feet a little bit more balanced, and that's going to help you basically to stay balanced and in rhythm up to the top of the swing. So I would just feel like you're more in your heels in your swing, rather than if you feel that you're in your toes too much and kind of leaning out toward the golf ball, feel the opposite. And if you overdo it, then just ease off of it to get a more balanced feeling. All right. Robert B says, give me a ballpark percentage guesstimate here how much of a person's weight in percentage should be in or her left foot at impact and then in the straight line release. So Swing Catalyst, not sure if you all are familiar with that, but basically it's a mat that has a ton of sensors in it, and it measures the pressure that you're putting into it with your feet. So they measured tour players and like hundreds of tour players, and they took an average of the percentage, the pressure percentage throughout key parts of the swing. So at address, you were seeing it was about 55 on the lead foot. They're pretty balanced. It was basically 50-50, but about 55% of it was on the lead foot at address. And I think that's just because it's just to get a little bit of a push off. You know, they're all to get your momentum moving in this way. You would have a little bit of weight here to kind of help move that momentum in that direction. So I think that's why, but for the most part, balance there. At the top of the swing, you saw it was about 75-80% of the pressure was in that trail foot. And then they come out to impact, and this is going to answer your question right here. 75-80% again at impact was in the lead foot. So back foot at the top of the swing, 75-80%, and lead foot was 75-80% in the downswing. And then in the full finish, you're talking 90% of the pressure, the total pressure that they're putting into the ground was in the lead foot in the full follow through. So when you're talking it's 75-80% at impact, in the straight line release, you're talking it's going to be a little bit more. It's probably going to be in that 80-85% range. And then in the full finish, you're at 90%. So that's the feeling. You should be feeling most of the pressure. If not, the feeling is probably that you need to have basically all the pressure in your lead foot at impact. That's probably the feeling that most people is going to work the best for. You know, if you have a lot of pressure in that back foot, that means that you're hanging back. You're going to tend to chunk the ball. You may even tend to hit a lot of hooks and things of that nature. So we want to be getting a good weight shift to our lead side and getting, 75-80% of our weight or the pressure that we're putting into the ground, the total pressure, about 75-80% at impact, 80-85% in the straight line release. All right, so Chuck M says, I struggle with rhythm and tempo, especially as I go from shorter clubs to longer clubs. I want to speed things up. Are there any drills to make me more consistent in those two items from pitching to driving? So let me tell you a little bit about the couple of the main things that I see that really make people speed up. So number one is they put like a death grip on the club. So if you have a lot of tension in your arms and you're gripping the club very, very strongly at address, so they'll put a lot of pressure into the grip, you're going to tend to be a little bit more quick when you're going back with that tension. If you think about it, if you have a lot of tension going on, it's hard to kind of go slow. You're going to tend to want to really get things going. So that's number one. I would try to just lighten up the pressure at address, get loose, relaxed. If you're thinking, gotta hit it, gotta hit this one hard. If you're thinking that kind of way, instead of more relaxed and just let the range of motion and then in the downswing feel more like you've got to really hit it. That's the best thing for you. As far as the other biggest thing that I see is people just don't get a big shoulder turn. So, basically, what I see a lot of times is where people get a short, really, really short backswing, and they tend to really be quick in the downswing. So they basically go boom, boom like that. They don't get a full backswing. So that's the other thing is you want to make sure that you're getting a nice full shoulder turn. If you're getting a nice big full shoulder turn, it's going to take you longer to get to the top of the swing. So that's going to help with your kind of rhythm and tempo. And then 2, you're going to feel like you have all this space to get down to the golf ball to generate speed, and you're not going to rush things. So that's also going to help with your tempo. So number 1, make sure that you have, be fairly relaxed and loose. If you watch a lot of tour players, that you see a lot of arm kind of shoulder shrugs and arm twitching and things like that. They're getting loose and relaxed, and that helps you to be in good balance and rhythm and tempo, and helps you so you don't tense up. So that's number 1. Number 2 is just to make sure you're getting a nice full shoulder turn. Don't be in the hurry to get to that big full shoulder turn. Let those shoulders turn all the way to the top, and then once they're there, you have all that space to create speed. When you swing short, you're going to, tend to, because if you swing short, now you only have, this much. This is an exaggeration. Most people aren't swinging this short, but if you only turn your shoulders like this much, you feel like you've really got to rush this downswing to get any speed because you don't have enough space to create it. So if you get all the way up here, now you feel like you can really get down into it. So that would be my best suggestion for you. Ryan S. says, like you, I have big shoulders, and I've been, thank you. Like you, have big shoulders, and I've been having trouble turning them and having my head move a ton. Aside from getting my chin higher, any other tips? So what I would look at is, are you coming up out of your posture? Because if your head's moving, your head just doesn't move independent of your body. Your head's moving because you're usually standing up or you're moving side to side. So I'd be thinking about, do you have a stable spine? If you're kind of moving like that, you're coming up out of your posture, then your chin is getting in the way, right? So I would just make sure, I feel like your left shoulder is going down. So if you have, if you're right-handed, I feel like your left shoulder is going down more in the downswing, and that's going to help you stay in your posture. There's actually a great drill on the website it's shoulder to shoulder, I believe, drill. It's a video on the website. I think it's shoulder to shoulder drill for pure irons or something like that. So I haven't mentioned this in the office hours yet, but there's a great search tool on the website. If you go in the upper right-hand corner of the page, there's a search bar there, and you can use that to search a keyword and find tons of videos on the website. So if you go on there and search shoulder to shoulder, so shoulder, T-O, shoulder, not the number 2, but the letter or the word 2, and you'll find that video that I'm talking about. So in this video, what you do is you set something on the ground. I believe it's a towel, and you put a club across your shoulders, and in the backswing, you try to get your club, the butt end of the club, to be pointing down at the towel on the ground, and then the downswing, it's the same thing. So you're keeping your shoulders on this plane, whereas if you go like this, and now my shoulders are level here, well, now I can't see the golf ball. My shoulders hitting me in the chin. I'm standing up. My head's moving up. That's what it sounds like, what's happening with you. So check out that drill. I think that drill will really help you to get you to where you're not standing up out of it as much. All right. So Nicholas S. says, if you set up with a closed club face, would this make it harder to shallow out the club? Not necessarily. And one thing is, just because you set up with an open club face or closed club face, or you set up with the ball out on the toe or on the heel or, wherever, just because you set up with the ball there, that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen at impact. I think this is one thing I see a lot of amateurs do, is that maybe they start hitting the ball off the toe and then they start lining up on the heel. Well, that actually doesn't usually help them. It may help them immediately, but over time we adjust in your brain. It's actually going to hurt you in the long run, because essentially you're going to end up lining that ball up on the heel, and then subconsciously that you have to bring your hands more inside. Otherwise you're going to hit the ball off the hosel if you're lining it up there. And then what happens, you actually ended up hitting it more off the hosel. So what are you going to do then? You're going to line the ball up to the inside. Where does it end? So what I recommend to tell people is to always line up, the way that you're comfortable with. Most people just line up the ball straight in the center of the face. That's where you want to have it typically. That's where you see you probably 99% tour players lining up the ball. And then from there, I would just try to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. So let's say you're you're hitting it off the toe today. You just can't stop hitting it off the toe. Then you decide, well, I'm going to line it off the heel. And well, instead of doing that, let's line up the way that we normally would. But when we swing the club at impact, let's try to hit it off the heel as much as we can. And if we actually accomplish that, then we can just ease off of it. But odds are what typically happens if you have a tendency to hit off the toe some days and you try to hit it off the heel, it's usually going to move that strike closer to the center of the club face. So it's all about adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. So setting up with a closed club face I don't see any connection about how that's going to help you or hurt you shallowing out the club. It's a different kind of motion. Shallowing out the club is this. So that's wrist rotation, right? That's wrist rotation. So closing the club face comes from turning that down. So it's this motion. That's wrist flexion. That's what closes up the face. So if you're at address here, if I angle this down and I set up with the face more closed, that's not this. That's this. That's closing the face, is turning that handle down. So that's not the same motion. Shallowing is this. Closing the face is this. So I don't see how that's going to help you or hurt you to shallow out the club. All right. So Nicholas F. again says, best way to set up after you assured that the club face is aligned properly. Do you set up around club face position? So I'm not sure exactly what your question is. But like I said, I think the best way to set up to the ball is just to be in the center of the club face. And then whatever is going on at impact, if you're hitting the ball, you're hitting 2 inches behind the ball every single time, hitting behind it. Try to hit 2 inches in front of it. It's all about adjusting your feel to get the desired result. You want to focus on what's going on at impact and adjusting your feelings there. All right. So Mauricio R. says, in order to avoid casting the club in the downswing and keeping lag as long as possible, should the leading arm keep accelerating until the release? Yeah, you want to feel like you are accelerating all the way through, even in the release. Because after you've released the club, that's basically when, everything's going to start slowing down naturally because you can't keep moving, right? So if we could just keep spinning around and round and round, if you think about like how an owl turns its head, like if our hips could just keep spinning around and round and round like an owl's head, well, we could just keep everything accelerating through as much as we can. But we have a minimum range of motion, only a maximum range of motion that we have with our body. So that has to, our body is decelerating as we're coming into impact, and then our arms are coming in, they're accelerating, and then after, because we can't keep moving around and round, everything starts to decelerate. But I would try to feel like everything is accelerating as long as you possibly can, and that's going to get you the most speed. I wouldn't try to get here and then slow everything down. I would try to feel like you're keeping everything moving as much as you can. And that's going to give you the most speed. That's going to give you the most momentum for sure. All right. So Robert B posted his question again about the weight shift total. So if you weren't, Robert, if you weren't around when I answered that question, we do archive the office hours. So if you go to the office hours highlights page, I'll post that on there once we get done here. I'll go on there shortly after the office hours are over, and I'll post the archive on there. So if you go down there, you can watch the archived office hours if you missed me answering your question. But I'm not going to answer your question again in this one, just so I can answer other people's questions. All right. So Dan B says, how to get a flat wrist at the top of the swing. So one is, it's kind of like what I was saying earlier. If you are going up the top and you feel like you're having a flat wrist, but your wrist is like this, well, you need to adjust your feeling to have your desire, get the desired result that you want. So at the top, you may want to feel like you're like this. So if you look at, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, their wrist is actually like this. Dustin Johnson's crazy. It's like a 90-degree angle up here. Koepka is a little less bowed, but it's bowed as well. But you may want to feel like you're in that area to get it to where it's actually flat. So let's talk about the reason why you would even want a flat wrist to begin with. You can play golf with a cupped wrist. You can play great golf with a cupped wrist. Freddie Couples, not sure if you all have gone through the opening drive section, or Dean, if you have, but there's a video in there where Clay talks about Freddie Couples' swing and how he's doing a lot of things that people say is you shouldn't do, you shouldn't ever do. And one of them is a cupped left wrist. So why is this a bad thing? So what a lot of people say is that that's the club face is open. And technically, it kind of is. The club face is open, but it only matters if it's open at impact. The face doesn't matter up here. You're not hitting the ball up here. You're hitting the ball on the ground at impact. So having the club face like this, people say that it's open. And it's like, well, the club face isn't necessarily open because it's not at impact. That's the only place where it matters. So if you're coming down into impact and you have a square club face, then you're in good shape. If you're having trouble controlling the club face, meaning you're missing left and right, you can't get it to, or you're leaving the face open a lot, then you may want to look at, okay, if I get my wrist a little bit flat or a little bit bowed, is that going to help me to square up the face a little bit better? So it might be something to look into. So what I would just say is I would try to bow the wrist at the top. And, if you can actually do it, then that's completely fine. That's going to help you to turn into the ball, and it's going to be a different sensation for you at impact because the wrist isn't having to do as much. So if you have a cupped wrist, like Freddie Couples, basically you just have more to do in the downswing. Basically you have to do this. You have to uncup it and get it flattened out at impact to square up the face. Whereas if you have a flat or bowed wrist, you don't have to do, the face is already kind of square, so you don't have to manipulate it in any way. So it only matters what's happening at impact. But I would say the best drill to do would just be to really exaggerate it and try to get it like this. There's also training aids that you can get that go on your glove that will snap. It'll give you kind of an audible feedback that will snap. It'll make a snap sound and tell you if you're in the right position, and to tell you basically if you're cupping your wrist or not. So that might be something that's good because it's a little bit easier than having to look at the camera all the time. And then there's also, I don't have a golf glove, but if you take a golf glove and put some tees in it on the Velcro and basically have those tees to where they're kind of sticking down here, well, as soon as you cup your wrist, those tees, now don't use super sharp tees so they're stabbing you too bad, but if you have some kind of dull the tips on them, you'll feel that going into your arm, and that will also tell you if you're cupping the wrist or not. I would just do some practice swings where you're really trying to feel like you're getting in this position at the top and turning down into impact. But I would only work on that if you're really having trouble controlling the club face at impact, or if you're leaving that face open a lot, because that might be why. It's because you're not turning that handle over. And if you get to where you're flat at the top, that may square up the club face a little bit better for you. But that would be my best suggestion there. All right, let me get a drink real quick. All right, so David Y says, I can get out of bunkers reasonably easily, but I have trouble with hitting further than 10 feet. What's your advice for varying the distance from a greenside bunker? So if you're, it really just depends on, so first of all, if you're only hitting a bunker shot 10 feet, it's possible you're just taking way too much sand. Typically, you want to take 4 to 6 inches probably at most of sand, somewhere in that range. It sounds like you may be taking a ton of sand and, or it's not coming out of there very far. The other thing that may be happening is you're just not swinging hard enough. You gotta get down and accelerate through the ball. That's one thing that I see with amateurs that really struggle out of bunkers is that it's a shorter shot that you're taking a big swing. So you feel like, man, I can't swing this hard and only hit the ball that far. It's kind of a subconscious feeling that happens. So you see them decelerate into the ball. So you want to make sure that you're accelerating through it, through the bunker shot. So I might be looking at, making sure that take a hard swing at it. You may need to take a full swing to get the club head speed to get it to go further than 10 feet. I would look at how much sand you're taking out. So there's a drill that you can do. I believe it's in our wedge game series, the wedge system. But basically let me basically try to draw this out for you. Basically what would happen. So let's say we're in the sand right here, okay? What you do is you take two clubs and let's put them a foot apart. So let's say that that's a foot apart, even though it's probably a little bit more than that. And then, so here's a line in the sand, that club. This club is another line in the sand. And then you would put one in the middle. So one line going all the way through here. And then you would put the ball in the middle of that. And then I would take shots and I would see where my club was entering the sand in relationship to the line. And then you can kind of adjust what's going on there. So if you see that you're coming in and you're coming in 4 inches behind that line, well, you're just taking way too much sand, and the ball's just not going to go very far. So, or if you see that club's coming in here and then it's exiting way over here, where again, that sand is what's propelling the ball, and that it's just happening too much. You're not getting enough basically club in there on the ball. So I'd be looking at that and seeing, put it up like a foot apart, 3 lines, 6 inches apart, put the ball in the middle line and see you want to be entering the sand at that first line and leaving the sand at the second line, and then adjust your feeling to get the desired result that you want. So if you feel like you're coming in right at that first line, but you're actually 3 inches behind it, well, I would actually try to feel like you're swinging 3 inches in front of it. Go to, the bunker game is something that you have to practice and to get a really good hang of it. Unfortunately, a lot of practice facilities don't necessarily have a place to work on your bunker game, but it's just something you got to go out to practice to be really, really comfortable with. The other thing that you can do is you can look at adding more loft. So let's say maybe you're a really low swing speed player. You're taking a full speed swing out of there. You've got a 60-degree wedge, and you're taking a full speed swing out of there. You're taking the right amount of sand, all of that. I would look at using a lesser lofted club. So, this is a 56-degree wedge. You could use a 56-degree wedge. You could use a 50-degree wedge, 52, something with a little less loft, which is going to add a little bit more to getting the ball to move forward for you. So those would be the things I would look at. One, swinging hard enough. Are you just taking like a little swing? I would take, a harder swing to get it to go further, more club head speed. And then 2 would be making sure that you're taking the right amount of sand, somewhere 4 to 6 inches would be good. And then 3 would be using less loft to get the ball to go a little bit further out of the sand. All right. So Daryl K says, what drills would you recommend that facilitates covering the ball close to impact? I tend to release my angles too soon and will hit the ball fat or behind the ball. Hence, I cannot get strong compression consistently. Thanks. So the number one drills for that are going to be the move section. So the move, what we do in the move, and again, if you haven't seen our move course, you can click on the house icon, scroll down, and see all the courses of the website, the move. So the move is actually 2 things. Number 1 is it's shallowing out the club. So if we're shallowing out the club, that's going to allow us to turn into impact. Whereas if we're steep, it's going to allow us to turn and stay in our posture. If we're steep, several things could happen, but the main thing that happens is that people stand up out of their posture. So they stand up, they don't rotate, and that's to get this club to drop down. And when we stand up, we also are getting further away from the ball. So what do we got to do? We ended up flipping at the ball, right? So we want to shallow out that club so that we can stay in our posture and turn into the golf ball and be able to have forward shaft land impact. So that's that covering the ball at impact. That's the feeling that you want to have there. The second thing that it is it's squaring up that face earlier. So if we look at the club, I have my wrist pointing up to the sky here, and I have that matched up with the shaft. So this would be like a neutral grip where my back of my left hand is basically lined up with the face. If I were to square up the face or turn my handle down, my wrist, I'm doing this with my wrist, kind of like I'm turning the throttle on a motorcycle. That same thing is squaring up the face. See how that face is closing up? So shallowing out the club and squaring up that face early allows me to really turn into impact. So shallow, turn that handle down allows me to turn into impact. So the best drills for this are going to be from the move section, specifically the tennis racket drill. I really should get a tennis racket drill because I mentioned this drill in a lot of office hours. It's really probably the number one. We see a lot of people having a lot of success with this drill. But essentially, you use a tennis racket to give you a great visual of what's going on. So the tennis racket, first you hold it here and you try to point the face of the tennis racket up to the sky, right? And then the second piece, that's the shallowing out the club. And the second piece is the squaring of the face. So the strings are pointing up to the sky, and now it's going to be pointing toward the camera. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to think about how the face is pointing because there's loft on the face and the face is way up here. But if you have that tennis racket, it really, really helps you to see exactly what's going on. And then you can kind of feel, okay, now I'm coming into impact and I've got that tennis racket pointed at the target when I'm at impact. So I'd be recommending that one for sure. But the move section in and of itself, the whole thing it's the best thing. It's the best drills that you can do to help you to cover the ball as you're coming into impact, to get that forward shaft lean and get that release out in front a lot better. So that's what I'd be looking at for sure. All right. So after Daryl Case, John C says, is the left side more dominant in backswing for right-handed golfers? So, I mean, the left side, I would say the right side is probably more dominant in the backswing because everything, you're kind of pushing and pulling everything up, but you're using both sides of your body. I wouldn't feel like you're necessarily more passive or anything. Just do what gets you to where you need to be. Your feeling might be different than somebody else's. So it's probably, for most people, it's probably more of a right side feeling for the backswing for a right-handed golfer. But some people might feel better to use their left side to get everything pushing that way. And some people might feel better getting their right side. It's just whatever gets you in the right position at the top. So I would look at your swing on camera, try both feelings out. Try, just feeling like your whole body is taking you up there and you're not passive or dominant with either one, and see which one puts you in the right position. So Robert B says, I see a huge number of seniors closing their stance at address, especially the pros. So not sure. Is that, well, thanks for sharing, Robert. I'm not sure if you had a question or not, but, that's not, I haven't really seen a ton of that, but what, closing your stance can do is it can make it easier for a couple things. So one, it can make it easier for you to turn away from the golf ball. So, if you're someone who has limited flexibility, let me get these out of the way. If you're someone who has limited flexibility, getting a bigger range of motion is going to help you to turn more to get more speed. So let's say that this is a square stance and now I'm closed, okay, that's going to help me turn my back to the ball a little bit more. That's basically giving me this, however many degrees closed you are, you're getting that many more degrees of turn. So that's one way that it can help you. It can also help you to be able to come from the inside a little bit more. So you can swing that club from the inside. But there are cons to it. If you're more closed at address, it's going to be harder to open up to the ball as you're coming into impact because you have that much more to make up for. So it's all about finding a happy medium there. But honestly, you just got to do it whatever gives you the best results, whatever improves your impact or gets you more speed. Try turning, closing the stance a little bit and see if that can help you to turn away from the ball a little bit more. Honestly, this isn't something I've tried. I might try that this week and see. I'll take one that's a normal stance and, give it a rip, basically swing as hard as I can, see what happens. And I may do one where I have a closed stance and see if it actually helps me get any more. Because like I said, there are pros and cons to it. It's going to be harder to open up your body to the golf ball if your body's closed at address. You've got a lot more to open up to get there. And if you're someone who struggles to open up to the ball, it may not be something that you want to do, which I think is a lot of people. Now, the other side of that is setting up more open, right? Because I know you're thinking, well, I have trouble opening up. Should I stay more open? Well, it could help you to open up more, but then it's the pros and cons, right? My con is I'm not going to be able to turn my back as much to the golf ball to be able to get a bigger range of motion, turn away from the ball to get that much speed. So I just play around with it. There's no hard and fast rule that says it's not a universal truth that you have to set up square, you have to set up open or closed. You set up whichever way gives you the biggest benefit at impact. The top speed golf system, those are the things that impact that are happening. They're the most important. Those are universal truths. So those are things that all tour players do, every single one of them. And I would throw the move in there as well. You see a lot of tour players, senior players, Champions Tour players with all kinds of open, closed stances. Look at Bubba Watson. I mean, his stance is wide open. And it's usually because he's trying to play a cut. It makes it a little bit easier to play a cut when you do that. But there's all kinds of things that you can do. So I would just, try out. That's probably why you see the two main reasons why you see people with a closed stance is one, it helps them turn their body away from the ball a little bit, maybe get a bigger range of motion, might help them get a little bit more speed. And two is that it helps you swing from the inside a little bit easier. So if you're someone who's already getting plenty a turn, you're getting plenty of distance, and you have no issue swinging from the inside, it may not be something that would be right for you. But I'll just try it out and see what works best. Robert B says, any special adjustment of technique required? I'm assuming that's a follow-up. So it just depends on, the top speed golf system is all the same. You would still want to be 6 to 8 degrees tilted away and angled away as you're coming into impact. You still want your compression line to the right. You still want to get a big turn. All the 5 pieces of the top speed golf system are the same. But what may happen if you do close your stance is you may swing too much from the inside now, and you may end up hitting some blocks and some hooks. So it might be a little bit different of feeling that you have, but it's just something you got to play around with. And you may need to feel like you're swinging a little bit over the top, even though that's not what the reality is going to be. But it's going to be adjusting your feeling to get basically to get that club to be more on path. All right, so let me go ahead and get a drink here one more time. All right, so Mauricio R says, is it okay at the beginning of the downswing to tuck the right elbow under the leading arm in order to flatten the club? Yeah, we actually have some videos about maybe a feeling of getting that right elbow to go in. I like to think about it as it's coming in toward the belt buckle. I feel like that helps a lot of people, the feeling. So what he's talking about is if you get that club shallowing out, this elbow is out here, you're going to tend to want to come down steep, right? So if you get this elbow kind of turning in like this, well, now that's going to make it easier to shallow out that club. So that's definitely a good feeling to have, is that you're bringing that elbow. Now, you're not going to be able to do this, right? That's an exaggeration. You're not going to be touching your elbows, but that's a good feeling to have, that elbow kind of coming in like that, because that's going to help you to shallow out that club. So absolutely, you can definitely do that. We actually have some drills and some videos on the website that talk about that. Dan P says, I tend to hit the irons flat when I hold my lag, so it's hard to get the club going up on contact to avoid chunking the shot. Let me read that again. I tend to hit irons flat when I hold my lag, so it's hard to get the club going up on contact, chunking the shot. So I'm not really sure exactly what you mean, but you are saying that you're holding the lag, and that is not something that you want to do. You want to generate lag. So up at the top, you have this angle. You've set your wrist here at the top. Well, in the downswing, you want that angle to get smaller. So you're not holding onto anything. You're generating, storing energy to probably about this point. It's usually lead arm parallel to the ground. The downswing is usually where you actually start to release it. But you're generating lag and then you're releasing. So storing energy, then releasing that energy is what's happening in the swing. You don't want to feel like you're storing that energy and then you're holding on to it and then you release it. You never want to feel like that. So that might be the issue that you're having. So I would just try to go out and feel like you're generating the lag, you're storing the energy. It's generating here and then it's releasing about when that lead arm is parallel to the ground. I think it's a little misleading sometimes when we see player swings in slow motion, and it just seems like from here to here, it just seems like they're holding on to it, and that's not what's happening at all. If you the club is actually, it gets to a point to where it's the sharpest angle, and then it gets to a point to where it's starting to release. Now it's happening very, very slowly in that beginning when that lead arm is parallel to the ground to when it gets to the waist. It's happening very, very slowly, but it's releasing. So let's say, tour average, we measured all the major winners the last 20 years, and we found that 55 degrees was the average max lag angle. So that's the angle between the lead arm and the shaft. We found that was about 55 degrees was the average. So probably about right there. And then from there to there, it might only release 5 degrees. So let's say I'm at 55 here, and then down here, I might be at 60 degrees, or I might be at 70 degrees. It's a very short amount, but when that hand gets to waist level, or when that club gets parallel to the ground, so that's going to be when let me angle this down a little bit. So it looks like it releases very, very quickly. It looks like it's being held on to about this point, but the reality is that it's slowly releasing. But when it gets here, when the club is parallel to the ground, usually the hands are about in front of the trail thigh here. When it gets here to after impact, it releases very quickly. So this club head is moving from there to there, but my hands are only moving about maybe 1.5 feet. They're only moving from there to there, but that club head's moving a lot. It's moving 12 feet probably. So that's why it seems like it's being held and then released right there. But the reality is you're generating it, and then slowly releasing to there, and then it really flies through there as it really generates momentum and whips through there. So that's probably the issue. Would be my guess is what's going on is that you're trying to hold on to that lag, generate the lag, and then release it. That's the feeling that you want to have. All right, so it looks like that was the last question. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me for the office hours. I will be back here tomorrow, 9 a.m. If y'all have any questions at that time, we will answer to them then. Have a good one.